So we do have a little exception error in here that was contrived. So I'm going to get rid of all of the breakpoints. And the contrived error happens if we try to add a new movie and we leave the name blank. And that is because if we look over here, and we look at name, we're saying name cannot be null. And if it's blank, it's null. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to run with debugging. And we'll create a new movie. And actually, we're supposed to leave the name blank. And here we get a lovely exception error. And it's kind of telling us you can't have null in the column name, which is actually a pretty good error message. By default, it shows us the stack. And you can actually look at the query, cookies, headers, routing, if you needed to do additional problem solving. But we can kind of tell from what it's giving us here that we are not supposed to have a null name. So that is our issue. Now, I do want to show you what happens when you just press F5, because we ran that with Control and F5, which is the start without debugging. And now we're going to start with debugging, or we're going to start debugging, which is F5, which is kind of what we have been doing by clicking on the browser button. So here we are again. Same error. And now what it's going to do is it brings us back into the app. And we get this, little exception window. And it is basically telling us the same thing. Okay, so here's the exception. Okay, the column does not allow nulls. Okay, this is called an exception helper. And again, you're either going to get the internal server error or the exception helper, and it depends on how you were running your app. You know, did you press Control and F5, or did you just click on Run? So I'm going to go ahead and stop. So Control and F5, start without debugging. That gives you the internal server error. F5 gives you the little exception helper. So we already know, because we peeked, that name is not null. So the problem is going to be in our model. And so if we look at movie, and then we look at name, we don't have required. And that is the problem. The database is requiring for name to be filled in, but we don't have that in our model. And so we're going to add the attribute. And we'll do a custom error message. Now, you may think that we need to do a migration, but the database is correct. So we actually don't need to do a migration. Um, the database doesn't need to change. The error is actually in our model. Now, you could be thinking, well, how in the world could that have happened? It could have happened if with database first, if we pulled in an existing database, we generated the model and then we changed it. Okay, or it just can be user error. So what we are going to do is run this again. And it should work this time. So let's leave the name blank. And you can see that now we are getting the error message that we would have expected. And now that it's forcing me to enter a name, it is all working properly. So at this point, we've kind of taken a look at all of the different features except for trace points, and we are going to be adding those. We're actually going to trace a couple different things. We are going to monitor the viewbag.action property to make sure it is functioning properly because we are using, just as a quick reminder, our edit view is being used to add and to edit. And it's that property that is kind of determining which one. So we're going to monitor the property. And to do that, we are going to add some trace points to our movie controller. And then after we do that, we want to check the ID that is used in the edit and the delete action methods, just to make sure that those are also processing correctly. So just as a double check. So first thing is the view bag action. We are going to open up our movie controller. And on the line below where it sets the view bag action, that's actually where we're going to add the trace point because by then it'll have the value. And I'm just going to copy and paste. So I'm asking for the function, which is going to tell me the action method it's in. And then I'm just displaying the action that gets sent or gets set. And I'm offsetting this with asterisk just so I can find it easier in the output window. So that's my first one. And you can see here's another one. And I'm just going to paste right in here. And you can see here's a third one. So at this point, I've got it at the 3 spots that I need it to be in. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my edit view. And I'm going to add 1 here. And it doesn't really matter uh, where you put it here as long as it's on an executable line. Okay, and the executable lines are the ones here with our razor code. So I'm going to put it right here. And I'm just going to display what is in the action property of the view bag. So here you can see I've kind of done my own little custom text instead of using $function. And here I am retrieving what's in the action. So I actually have 4 different trace points. Coming from the controller to the view, it's only going to execute one, and then it'll execute the view. Then if I go back into the controller, we'll get the controller executing and the view again. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And we do kind of want to watch our output window on this, because that's where the trace points are going to display. And I'm going to pull my app over here. And we'll add a movie. And let's see if we can find our trace. And you can see why I put those asterisks in. It's really, really hard to find it otherwise. So here is the edit, was the edit, it scrolled. That was the edit. So this is coming from the view. It had an add. So above that, this is from the controller. So I use $function, and then I've got the view bag add. So I would expect that the view bag values are the same, and they are. So I'm going to do a little edit. Let's edit the first Christmas. We're going to change the rating. And so here you can see from the controller, I get my little message. I'm going to hit edit. And then here is from the view. So at this point, we've got the trace points that we wanted for monitoring the action property in our view bag. We still need to add the trace points for ID that is used in the edit and delete action methods. So I'm going to close this. And we're going to go back into the movie controller. And then we want to add another trace point for ID. Now ID should be getting passed from the view. So that is what we're going to be looking for. Because what we want to check is we want to make sure it is editing or deleting the correct item. So we're not really interested in the post because the post happens after the deletion or after the edit. We want to make sure that the one that they're sending us to is right. So we're going to be looking at the get. And the ID is a parameter. So we are going to tell it to display the ID. And I'm just going to copy paste the code here. And again, I'm putting in those asterisks so I can find it easier. I am going to display the function. I've got the movie ID equals, and I'm setting it to that parameter that's getting passed. Okay, so that's for the edit. Now let's go down to the delete. All right, so we want to make sure that this ID that's coming in is correct. And let's run our app. So we should see this output if we choose to edit or delete. So let's do both. Let's see. I'm going to edit. And then I'm just going to delete. And let's take a look. So I'm actually looking for the asterisks, which is why I put those in, because it's way easier to find it. So here's my delete, movie ID of 7. Here's my edit. So these are both in the view. Here's the edit for 7. Here's coming from the controller with the delete for 7. It happens to be the same one. If you remember, I edited and I deleted the same one. Okay, and that's pretty much where those codes are. And I still have all of my other messages displaying. Okay, so at this point, we've got our trace points in, and we can stop running our app. Now, you do want to make sure you've saved all your changes, and you're going to need to put this up on GitHub, actually both of your projects. And because you downloaded them, remember to put them up there as a new project. You are going to need to get rid of the GitHub folder. Okay, so for the starter, get rid of your Git folder, and then you should be able to add the source. And for this one, actually it's the same one. So at this point, you should be able to upload it. You may have to close your solution and then reopen it in order to get that add message.